Hello, this is Greg Allison with Green Greg's Garden and Worm Farm, coming to you with my eyes wide open and head on a swivel news to keep you aware of what you need to know to prepare and what you might need to know just to keep things better. So let's start out with this. If you think that China's grasp on the South China Sea is a really big deal, and it is, I have to tell you, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till you see what China is planning and doing right now in the South Pacific with those islands. And before I get into that, though, I want to offer a little disclaimer. There are multitudes of great people in China. I mean, decent, hardworking, warm-hearted people that are smart, brilliant. But the government under Xi Jinping is a whole nother thing. And that's what we have to watch out for. In a meeting at the in Bangkok just this Monday, the Association of Southeastern Asian Nations, the Chinese Defense Minister, Wei Fengxi, I believe, I'm probably murdering his name, but he told U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, you better stop flexing your muscles in the South China Sea. Really? He's warning the U.S. China is bossing the U.S. around. And China says, oh, this has nothing to do with the fact that we're putting our brand new aircraft carrier into force in the South China Sea. China is actually telling the U.S. that the U.S. should not escalate tensions. Well, excuse me. When China goes in and grabs all those islands in the South China Sea that are claimed by all these different nations of Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Brunei, and claiming it right up to their shores. Yeah, well, that creates a lot of tension. And mind you, some of these countries, like the Philippines, are starting to push back and pursue other alternatives. And Vietnam is taking note. So these countries are not taking this easily. So that just ratchets up the tensions even more. But wait, there's more stuff going on. That's not all. I mean, just in near term, right now news. There's this whole appalling thing going on in Hong Kong right now, that with the student protest at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Right now, there are over 100 students, at least as of my last report, over 100 students still barricaded in that school. And the Hong Kong Chinese authorities, the Chinese, mind you, actually arrested like 1,100 students just yesterday. They have been firing on these students with bean bags, tear gas. The Aussies even were told that 2 of their diplomats were banned from going into China until they repented to the Communist Chinese. Excuse me? Really? Wow. That's a lot of gall for China. They're trying to dictate the United States. They're trying to dictate to Australia. What they're doing with the protesters in Hong Kong is off the charts against human rights. But since when does China ever care about human rights? I mean, and furthermore, about human rights, the United States House of Representatives and Senate have passed a bill called the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, and it's waiting the president's signature, Donald Trump, to be passed into law. But China says if Donald Trump signs this, they will retaliate. Well, we're just trying to talk about sanctioning individuals for violating human rights, but China views this as meddling in their internal affairs. Interesting. Kind of reminds me of some things that went on in Europe back in 1930s and 40s. So if you really want to know what's going on at the Polytech University, one of the students there, a woman, says, hey, we have no water supply, no food supply. We know that our energy supply is being cut off as well. There's no way out. Police have been firing tear gas, she says, rubber bullets, and maybe live rounds at us. And according to the South China Morning Post, they claim that police fired 1,458 rounds of tear gas, 1,391 rubber bullets, 325 beanbag rounds, and 265 sponge grenades, whatever that is. But clearly, they've been assaulting these students. They're barricaded, they're starving, and they're being threatened with arrest, and they're being charged of criminal protest and such and so forth. And mind you, it may not go well for these students. There have been students shot, and it's not just students. The middle class in Hong Kong is part of this, and it is really, really, really festering over there. And this started over 5 months ago with the prospect of extraditing Hong Kong citizens into China, into a different legal system where they knew they would not get a fair trial. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back, because what the people in Hong Kong are afraid of is their loss of freedoms. But hey, you know, a lot of people think China's great and wonderful, and but you need to understand this, what goes on inside of China. The BMC Medical Ethics Journal has just accused China of covering up how they take prisoners' organs. They're still taking organs from prisoners. They're forcing them to give up their organs. And, you know, they have in the past killed prisoners just for their organs. And what are the prisoners? Bad people? No, they arrest people just because they don't agree with China. They arrest people because they have a religious difference, because they're not good little citizens. They're political prisoners in China. They arrest people for all kinds of things. In China, you do not have right of assembly. You do not have freedom of speech. You do not have freedom of religion. You do not have freedom to dissent with your government. Some people think that we shouldn't have these freedoms here in America. And that's a growing sentiment across our universities. But when you look at the places where there are real prospects for losing these freedoms, look how the students respond very differently, my friends, very differently. Because the people are about to really lose their freedoms, or they're close to it, and they're seeing what's happening on the other side. They don't want any part of that, because it's not pretty. You know, you got to think about what's happening there. And furthermore, something else that just got leaked to the New York Times from some internal source in China says that in about 403 pages of documentation, that over 900,000 Muslims minority members were arrested and sent to re-education camps. We're talking about freedom of religion. It could be Christian. They're doing this to Christians. Anybody that's not towing the party line, because the party's number one mission is maintenance of the party, to maintain their power. That's all they care about. They don't care about the people. They do not care about their own people. If they did, they wouldn't be arresting them for just anything and taking their organs from them and doing all these terrible atrocities. What kind of government does that that's so great and wonderful? Now, I give a warning to the peoples of Africa, South Pacific nations, but accepting deals with China, economic deals, because you have another thing coming to you, my friends. If the Chinese don't care for their own people, how are they going to care for you? If you think when the Europeans came to America that they did the American Indians bad, and they did, it was a genocide. If you think that the Europeans were bad to the American Indian natives, Native Americans, whatever you want to call them, then watch out, because people that don't care about their own people are not going to care about you. And if you think they are, oh my gosh, you have another thing coming, and you will have another thing coming. So let's be clear. What's happening in the South Pacific Islands are switching sides right now to China. They're switching from favoring Western nations of Australia, United States, Taiwan, and siding with China. And typically what's happening is China's going into these islands, and they're buying off, bribing certain key politicians, and they're making these deals often against the will of the populace of the island. And what happens? China goes in, and the deals are to set up infrastructure. Sounds great. Hey, we're going to build roads, bridges, airports, seaports, but China still owns these. Yeah, the people get to use them. And even the people in these islands, you know, well, they get jobs. No, they don't. Chinese people go in and build these things in almost all these cases. It's the Chinese building. The Chinese own it. The Chinese maintain it. And when the Chinese come in, the deals they cut with the government is suddenly rights of press get in democracies. Freedom of press is gone. You can't just video stuff. You can't just talk. You can't just report. You get followed around. And these are in democracies. So what are we talking about? Greg, what are you talking about? The island of Caribus, the Solomon Islands are switching, my friends. Solomon Islands, where the United States had big campaigns back in WW2. And, you know, we thought the Solomon Islands were pretty much ours. There's an island that's belonged to Papua New Guinea that's voted for independence and will probably get it from Papua New Guinea. It's Bougainville. And Bougainville has a huge gold mine there. And China's making them great grand offers. They may be an offer you can't handle, because what they're offering is economic partnerships. But what they're really in for is economic mastery. The Chinese offer partnerships, but what they do is they come in as the masters. It's not a true partnership. So that is what they have to watch out for. You know, these countries are told they can't have deals with Taiwan, they can't do this, they can't do that. And oh, by the way, when matters come up for those that are independent countries, and most of these are, when matters come up for vote in the UN, they got to vote with China. And suddenly China is picking up scads, dozens of votes now in their favor in the UN. What they do is they go in and they bribe the key politicians. They give them $1 million, maybe $100,000. And for that, oh my God, what they get is off the charts. So friends, please support my channel. If you've not already subscribed, subscribe and click the update notification bell. And please click on the links below. Definitely can use your support. I do need to get some more equipment and some things to do better videos and a habitat project that I'm trying to build. So I've got some projects I'm trying to do, and I do need your support. So the Chinese went into the island of Tulagi, and they cut a deal with the provincial leader of Tulagi. And the deal was that China got all the rights to this island for 75 years. And this included fishing rights, mineral rights, oil, gas rights, rights to tourism, rights to the ports, the airport, the road, everything. They essentially would own this island, timber rights. But just so happens that this one individual actually didn't have the authority to do this. He disappeared, never to be seen again after making this deal. Maybe he went to China, maybe they discovered he didn't have the authority, and he off with them. Yeah, what should you make a deal with? And the people of the island declared this agreement to be illegal, null and void, and do not honor it. But this is an example of the kind of deals that China is trying to make. They'll go in and find any official that they think has got the power. They'll give them a sack of money, and this one individual will give away all his people and sell them short. And that's what's happening. Sometimes the people think they're getting a good deal, and the people may be going along with it, or at least a number of the leaders. And yeah, they get taken care of for now, but they're selling their people out. And they're not really, they're being very short-sighted because they're not considering who they're dealing with and what's to come later. Because, like I said, you know, it may be economic deals today, but it will be mastery tomorrow. What China has is a plan to dominate the entire region. We're not just talking Asia. We're not just talking South China Sea. We're talking the South Pacific. Taking possession of all these islands. It starts out with a nice economic deal. The next thing you know, they're controlling the governments a little bit and a little bit more. And then in comes maritime law. And the next thing you know, it's their navy for defense of their purposes, you know, whatever they may be. But, you know, all this becomes China's economic zone, kind of like the South China Sea. I mean, the South China Sea is Chinese is pretty darn absurd because it's sticking way down below China. I mean, way south of China, right up to the borders of all these other countries. You know, that's a lot of gall to claim that. And the World Court ruled against it, but China don't care. China's not going to abide by the World Court because China intends to be the World Court. China intends to be the #1 power. China's plan of dominance is actually called the Blue Economic Path. And they plan to run it all the way down to the Antarctic. And that's one of the maps in my thumbnail. So imagine it all the way down to the Antarctic. Essentially what they're doing is encircling Australia. So if you think as a prepper that you're going to find security by going to hide out in New Zealand or Australia, you might want to think again. If you are in New Zealand or Australia, you might want to think about cutting deals with these islands yourself, getting in there and taking charge to keep these islands from wanting to cut deals with China. You better go in and offer a better deal. And hey, Americans, wake up. Help out your buddies in Australia and New Zealand. If you want to have free passage to these seas, you better be thinking about, Greg, what does it matter? You know, a lot of people ask in the United States, what does it matter? That's them. Don't worry about them, blah, blah, blah. Okay, consider this. China is expanding and expanding and expanding. They're putting out the Silk Road. They're going into Africa. They're cutting deals in South America. They're going in all these islands. They're taking a very aggressive stance of expansion around the world. They're going to be cutting off key choke points for supplies, for international trade. And mind you, a whole lot of what we use in our industry is high-tech metals and other things that come from many other parts of the world. We do rely on international trade to get a lot of supplies and to sell the goods that we sell. Our economy is still very much based on these things. So suddenly, if you got to go through China to get to anywhere, to go anywhere at all, you're not in the best position, my friends. And, you know, China, you know, if America's the only thing standing in China's way, a little EMP would take care of business and there wouldn't have us there in their way anymore, my friends. I talk about EMPs. I talk about our power grid. I talk about such things. And if they do that and they're in this big position everywhere in the world, what are you going to do about it? What's the United States going to do? Really? And who knows, with all the ports they own here, with all the shipping they'd have, with all their bases and all the islands, what's keeping them out of your front yard? What I'm trying to do is to tell you that you need to be aware, you need to prepare. And, you know, maybe you should support people standing up a little bit, especially in the islands and New Zealand and Australia. Maybe this message is more for those people. And for those that would cut deals with people who aren't friendly with their own people. If you don't take care of your own people, if someone's not taking care of their own people, why do you want to cut a deal with them? What do you think you're going to get in the long term, especially if you're a country like Bougainville? They're wanting to come in and take control of your gold mine, and they're going to put in airports and all these things and roads, but they're going to own them, and the terms there are forever, essentially. Some of these are not 75-year leases. Some of these terms they're Chinese from there out for all perpetuity. And even if the deal isn't that, what makes you think that that is not what they intend? Now, can China back all this up? Which is China actually stable? So China knows that they're having problems. Their industrial economy is slowing down. And as a result, they've had this great, fantastic growth rate for years and years. So maybe they've reached a point where it's slowing down is not such a surprise. I mean, my gosh, in 1978, you know, 90% of the Chinese, actually 99% of the Chinese lived on about $2 a day. Now only 10% are below the poverty line. That's huge. That's huge. It's 1978. It's an economic explosion. So the Chinese, with their people, their population, their natural resources, yeah, maybe they're hitting a speed bump, but they're reaching out to grab resources. They're reaching out to take things all over the world. They're expanding their network, they're expanding their net, and they intend to survive and thrive and be the hive that we want to stay out of. Do you want to be in the hive? Do you want the Chinese social credit system on you? And, you know, what happens if the Chinese don't want people? You know, they just lop off the bottom tier of the social credit system. Maybe use those people that, you know, if you don't score above a certain score, you're out for organ harvest. I mean, my friends, it's a tyranny. It is a tyranny. Call it what you will. It's a tyranny. And we don't want the tyranny coming here. You know, we call them communist China, but it's kind of strange. China actually has the second most number of billionaires on the world. Isn't communism supposed to be a classless society? Now, what's the society called where the industry and the government are in league with each other and they centrally plan their economies, and economies operate, companies operate like almost like they're free enterprise, except they're owned by some government partnership. Where else did this happen? When else did this happen? Kind of, and all the emphasis on what they do to minorities, the re-education centers. Doesn't this sound like shades of the 1930s and some other part of the world? I don't know, my friends. You call that communism? Maybe there's other words for it, but any tyranny is bad. Any tyranny. So, Greg, where can all this lead? Why are you going into all this? Graham Allison, no known relation to me, although he's from North Carolina originally, so there's a possibility some ancestors went through there. But Graham Allison, professor of political science at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government, has come up with a term called Thucydides trap. Now, Thucydides is arguably the first historian. He's wrote the first history book. Now, you can talk about Homer and such other people, but Plato, but Thucydides was an actual historian and wrote the first history book about the Peloponnesian Wars, in which the classic Greek civilization got wrecked by civil war in about 2,500 years ago. And what this was an example of is when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power. This is what is described by Graham Allison as Thucydides trap. And in the case here, Athens was the rising power, and it bred a lot of resentment from Sparta, who feared losing their power. And so the Spartans went to war against Athens, and Thucydides wrote about this in his books at the time, although he didn't, I think, call it the Peloponnesian Wars, actually. But all that aside, what Graham Allison analyzed was as follows. In the last 500 years, there have been 16 instances wherein there was a rising power and a ruling power clashing. And out of the 16 instances, 12 of them resulted in a war, a major war. And of the 4 cases that didn't, one of them was when power transferred from Great Britain to the United States. Now, hey, we were allies as this all was taking place. We were fighting together in World War I and World War II, and remained allies through the Cold War. So this transition of power was within the sphere of this alliance that continued. So to think that we would be going to war with Great Britain at that point in time, no. That wasn't in the cards. That was a little bit different specter. The United States and the Soviet Union is one of those cases. Now, it just so happens that the Soviet Union might have been the aspiring power coming up, but they fell short. They didn't have the oomph to punch on through. And the fact that mutually assured destruction played into the cards might have been a factor in supposedly assuring that war didn't take place, although some still think that might yet take place. That might take place. At least it won't do it under the guise of the Soviet Union. But Russia today, maybe an alliance with China, would have an advantage against the United States. I would submit we ought to make friends with Russia, because Russia's going to have to fear China too down the road. And again, that would probably be having to watch out for China more than anything else. And like I said, still, there are a lot of good people in China, so I'm not really dissuading people. It's the government of Xi Jinping, the so-called communist government. So maybe our greatest hope for China would be that the people in China take control of their country and go for freedom. If China were a free nation, oh my gosh, the world would be in store for such greatness. It would be unbelievable what China could accomplish as a free nation. And if they are a free nation, I would say, hey, they deserve to prosper. And the people deserve prosperity anyway. But that's another matter. So it's a question of what's going on with the governments. I've always said in this channel that it's not the people, it's the governments, and I do maintain it. So let's go back to Thucydides' trap. On these occasions when there was war, you would think, oh yeah, they were all pitched for war. No. Actually, in most of these cases, neither protagonist, neither side wanted a war. What happened was there was a third party that entered into this and caused something to happen that escalated things toward a war. For example, in World War I, it was the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand. And 2 months later, he was a second-tier politician, for Pete's sake. And 2 months later, all of Europe is in blazes of war. So that's what happens. It's a third party getting involved. Third parties, what are you talking about, Greg? Well, there's plenty of third parties in play between the United States and China today. There's Hong Kong. There's Taiwan. There's the whole thing with the Spratly Islands, the South China Sea, and now perhaps expanding into the entire South Pacific. Maybe our friends in Australia, maybe New Zealand. Where's the shoe going to drop? I mean, China's in with Russia. They're in with Iran. They're in with Syria. Oh my gosh. And they're in Panama. They're in South America, Africa. There are so many places where things could go wrong as these two powers face off against each other. One waning, us, and them rising. So, and we don't fail so easily. And I take the case in point, the law I mentioned earlier that China told us that they would definitely cause trouble if we passed it, if our president signs the law passed by the House and the Senate. And by the way, if it passes the House and the Senate, it's bipartisan. This is not a partisan measure, looking out for the human rights of the people of Hong Kong. It's both parties. Our nation is so divided that when something comes across both parties, it's pretty amazing. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it right. It could still be deep state. Both parties are in the deep state. So the whole point of all this, what it all boils down to is what I've been saying all along. Our world today is in peril. The world today is a place that you have to keep your eyes open and head on a swivel, because we don't know what's going to come at us. If you're in a position of being able to make a deal with a nation that's a tyranny, I would say don't do it. And that may even apply to our own country in times, in places, and in ways. So be careful. Be very, very, very careful when you make a deal with the devil, because it might take you down to you know where. I use that metaphorically, by the way. But yeah, I hope you get that. And furthermore, keep your eyes open, because you need to prepare. You seriously need to prepare in this world that we live in today. Once again, please support my channel. Please click the links below. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, and bang the update notification bell. And thank you for watching.
You find these little green snakes.